Hello, John Bloodworth, Gentleman Crafter here, sharing my regular weekly adventures in machine embroidery. This week I have been exploring the Hatch embroidery software and looking at ways of using it with applique and the SVG cutting files that it can export, because I have a Brother scan and cut machine. If you don't know what I'm talking about, the Hatch Embroidery Digitizing software is available from hatchembroidery.com, and it is basically, in my opinion, the best digitizing software for embroidery machines out there. Do give it a try. There's a 30-day free trial if you'd like to. Now, I've already set up my machine, my hoop and my measurements in the software, and I'm now going to import the artwork reference. This is basically a little version of some of the cutting files I've previously made and released on Creative Fabrica. I will leave this particular image as a download on my blog, so if you want to have a go at digitizing this yourself, you can do so. Now, once that's in, I lock that layer, basically because I don't want it to move. Next up, I am going to zoom in, and I'm going to trace out or digitize in stitches the dress shape. And this is so that I can basically use it as my cutting file later on. So for this particular one, I'm being quite careful about where I'm going to put the stitches. Now I'm choosing an outline and a single run stitch because I don't really want to do anything fancy with it. I just want to make sure that I get that shape as close to the design as possible. So I'm using the left click and right click. So left click for a straight corner and right click for a curved corner to just trace around that image. And the software is moving the canvas for me, so I don't have to distract myself by scrolling around the screen. I can just keep clicking, as you can see by the little yellow circles. They're put on by my screen recording software. Don't expect to see those in the software itself. So I'm going around, just more dots at the corners and then less dots on long straight lines. And if your curve isn't following as you want, you can always backspace to remove the previous stitch and work your way back along the line. So you can always get it perfect. I'm not aiming for perfect, I'm aiming for pretty much, or that'll do, as we used to say. Make sure to get the hips in and the waist, and then those giant shoulders. Not quite sure why I made those so big, but there you go. Anyway, pressing enter sets that in place, and I'm just going to give that a colour, a specific colour, sorry, just so that it sets it apart from the rest of the stitching that's about to come. Again, I lock that layer so that I don't accidentally click on it while I'm doing the next stage. And for the next stage, what I'm going to do is digitize the hat, because again, I want to create a cutting file from that. So exactly the same process as before. However, the software has defaulted back to a fill, so you will see it come up as a filled shape shortly. But that's easy to correct later on. Thanks again to the software. Poof, there you go, nice hat. It did keep the colour though, so I don't have to change that. And again, I am going to lock that layer. I should turn that into a catchphrase, shouldn't I? Okay, next up, what I want to do is digitize the arms and the head. So I'm going for a freehand open shape on this one and a back stitch. And this means that I can click once and then just drag the cursor around the screen and basically draw with stitches. So it'll basically follow my cursor to a degree. Obviously it's using clever algorithms to make sure that it follows curves and corners as I work with the cursor. Once we set that in place though, we can adjust any minor hiccups, like it's missed off a part of her forearm there. So basically what I would do is go back to my select tool, zoom in and then go to my reshape tool, and then I can individually change the nodes that it has plotted, which is rather handy rather than having to go back and retrace the entire design. Working at higher zoom levels also helps you focus on individual nodes or individual parts. Now, if your curve isn't quite working, you can click on the line to create another point. So I did that just then, just to really add in another corner point. Left click obviously would give you a straight one, and right click would give you a curved one. Okay, so that's the basis of the figure. The next thing that I want to do is to lock that layer again to keep it in place. And then I'm going to zoom in. And next up, I'm going to change the color and use the freehand open shape again. This time I'm going to use a sculpture run stitch. And basically this is kind of what you would see in freehand motion embroidery. So I'm really basically just telling the automatic embroidery machine where to send the needle with the stitching. So I'm basically just sketching with stitches. I'm trying to make it as continuous as possible, but sometimes I do think not quite where I would like to have sent it, so I can just delete the old one and start again. Because it's so quick, it's actually a great process to use. Now I thought it might be better if I go up the head, work the hair, and then go along the hat. So I started again. And you can see how the stitches flow along the line. So the software is automatically working out the best length for the stitch and also the best curve according to where I've placed the cursor or dragged the cursor. I'm not at all worried about being precise for this because I want that sketched look. I am going to do it in sections. So I've done the hat, the hair and the shoulders here. And I'm just making a couple of adjustments to these, mostly because I want a lot of the stitching within the original outline that I created. And that's because that's where the fabric is going to be. So it will act as a tack down stitch itself. I don't have to go and create another tack down stitch. So for this, I went straight down the outside of the arm, and then I used the backtrack to add in basically a set of stitching on top of the stitching I'd already done. And then I'm being conscious about jump stitches, so I will have finished at the top of the arm. So the jump stitch will go from there to the next part. Excuse me. Backtracked here again. So what I will do is I will actually start my next stitch run there. So there's very little jump. And I'll go all the way around the dress. Till I reach the bottom. And then a very quick small jump, I think, and then put in some of the detail. Just doing the bottom of the dress and then a backtrack, then some of the detail, jump across, come down, jump across, go up. And then pick up where I left off. So you can see I'm not jumping from the top of the dress to the bottom of the dress. I'm just trying to be as conscious of where the last stitch run finishes and where I start the next one. Not always possible to make them very short, but if you make them, what's the phrase? Not cross each other, then they won't get secured down, so they'll be easy to remove later on. And now I'm just adding another stitch run around the perimeter of the dress. Again, this will add to that stitchy, sketchy feel to it. In some cases a bit more than I would have hoped. Just a couple of small refinements, and I think I'm happy. Just going to add a tiny little bit of detail at the top. And this is supposed to represent a flower. Because I'm working at such a small scale, I'm not going for a lot of detail in the face, just something to indicate her features. Now I'm going to save this as an EMB file, so that's a native file for Hatch, which means I can come back in and edit those stitches later. Then I'm going to go and select the shapes that I want to send out as cutting files, unlock them and select them. Go to the File menu, Export Cutting, and then you can see we've got the option to export the embroidery shapes. Works the same for applique shapes as well, and obviously you get to choose where you save it. So if I show you here, I now have the SVG cutting file automatically exported, ready to use. I also need obviously to save out the embroidery stitch file, so export design, and save it as a PES file as I'm using a Brother embroidery machine. If you save it all with the same name, it's easier to find later. I then used the rotary cutting blade on my Scan and Cut to cut out the dress and the hat from a piece of fabric, and that was using the fabric mat, if anybody was curious, if you also have a Scan and Cut. And then on the embroidery machine I did the outline stitch in a very light thread, and this is basically to help me see where to put the dress fabric later on. Then I stitched out the arms in a dark grey colour. And then finally, I stuck the dress to the linen with some fabric glue, just loosely, and then ran all of the sketchy stitching in a black thread. You could of course tailor this to whatever project you're working on. Now I did forget to stick the hat down, but this was basically a little adventure just to really hone that process and make sure that I knew what I was doing. I was kind of happy with the result in the end, apart from the fact that she had a bit of a smirky face, a bit of an attitude. But I really like this look, and I think I will look at doing this again in the future.